American dystopia.
Our next guest to the show, it is Mike for Kentucky, Mike Broihier. How are you, sir?
I am great. How are you tonight?
I'm doing awesome. I knew immediately that you were a smart man the minute that you hired Scott Santens.
Hey, between you and I didn't hire him. He volunteered, man.
Hey, man, he is the best. He is the best. I love him to death. He's good people. I want to read your introduction, and I will let you get started on the subject of social justice, sir.
Right on.
All right. Mike is joining us after a big day today. Mike was endorsed by Humanity Forward. His Rolling Stones article, Can the Yang Gang Take Out Mitch McConnell, was published today. And here he is to talk about social justice, UBI, and removing Mitch McConnell.
I don't know what's bigger, being endorsed by Humanity Forward or for a gentleman of my age, being in Rolling Stone. I gotta tell you, I might buy a 5 for my mother. It's been a big day, and it's been a long slog. I declared my candidacy back in July, and it was largely me and my wife Lynn just slugging it out, and wondering when we're getting a break in the national press, and wondering when people going to start paying attention. And today, everything just kind of came together.
That is awesome. Let's talk about Mitch McConnell for a second and where social justice fits into that.
Well, when I started my campaign, the campaign motto was economic and social justice for all. And I used to look at it as like two discrete things, like they were separate, and the more I thought about it and the more I worked through it, in my head and started forming the platform, the more I started realizing that they were so, inextricably tied to each other, that economic and social justice were so closely linked that it just became economic and social justice for all instead of two discrete items. And I know that probably sounds like a fine point to people, but for me, it was kind of a revelation. So you probably knew it in advance, but it took me a while to get there, that every single social justice issue has got a huge economic component to it. And so getting the endorsement of Humanity Forward and Andrew Yang was, after all these months, was really a validation of the kind of things that I've been working on for quite a long time. And even so, a lot of your viewers probably don't know me, but I started off, I went to public school my whole life. My dad was a Marine. My wife's dad was a Marine. My wife's a retired Marine. I'm a retired Marine. And so we grew up in that environment. And interestingly, speaking of social justice, it's, the military is, it's not perfect, but it's as close to a meritocracy as you can possibly get. And, I was teaching, my last tour of duty was at UC Berkeley. And a lot of my colleagues would ask me about the draft. And they'd say, what do you think about the draft? And I had a good answer. It was, great for America, bad for the military. And, always good to stump your very, very smart colleagues. But I would tell them that, that service in the military forces you to live, for the most part, co-equally with people of all races, creeds, colors, and nowadays sexual orientations, and people from all over the country. And it's a great opportunity for someone who might live in the inner city and someone who lives in rural Maine or Wyoming for at least a short time in their life. They are forced to live, and not just live, but in many instances, trust their lives to people they never would have associated with before. And so, and the other side of that, of course, was, as someone who commanded troops in combat, you don't want anyone there who wasn't a volunteer. So that was the good for America and bad for the military aspect of it. And but that was the beginning of my path to being a very, very progressive and liberal person. I think probably the point that was a real watershed moment was when I served in Somalia in 1992, 1993. There'd been a famine, a drought, and then a famine, and then a civil war. And my Marines and I went into Somalia to separate the warring factions, open up the ports and the airports, and have food and humanitarian relief supplies come into the country. And you know what? It was just this great moment where you saw that you can do good. There are times when bearing arms, it can be right. And in the case of Somalia, when I was there, at least 92, 93, Operation Restore Hope, we did great good. We went from people literally falling dead in front of our eyes from starvation to markets and schools opening and people cleaning the streets and establishing a local police force that was directing traffic and, stopping local crime and things like that. The dramatic and very violent point in my life really got me started towards becoming a more soft-hearted person, I guess. And, I think when you see things like that, one or two things can happen. Your heart can harden or it can soften. Mine just tend to soften as time went on. I did other things. I've worked overseas in Korea with some wonderful allies. Our friends in the Republic of Korea are just genuinely great allies and kind-hearted people. I taught at the University of California at Berkeley, which was a great opportunity, and farmed here in Kentucky for 15 years and really got to know the trials and tribulations of the people who live in the country. But the whole time I kept my eyes on the fact that we are a nation beset by social and economic injustice. And a lot of it is fueled by race. And, so when I began my campaign, there are some things that I want to do. I want to break this high school to prison pipeline. And part of that is ending the war on drugs. And a lot of the violence that your previous guest talked about, and the violence we've had right here in Kentucky in the last couple of months, your viewers are probably familiar with the Breonna Taylor case, where a young woman, an emergency a medical technician, a lovely young lady, the pride of her family, was gunned down in her own bed by members of the Louisville Metro Police Department, who had executed a no-knock search warrant at 1 o'clock in the morning. We have to break this cycle of violence, and it's up to us, and particularly people like me, members of the majority. I know we do not have a lot of credibility with those who are not, but and it's hard to find allies. And as the ladies in the previous segment were talking about, was questioning former Vice President Biden's selection of vice president candidates. We have a lot of ground to make up, and I know that. But I do have some things that are top priorities for me. Descheduling marijuana and expunging all the criminal records associated with that. There are so many instances that we force people into situations, into cash economies, largely fueled by drugs, in the inner city and in rural Kentucky, whether they just came out of prison, they're unbanked, they cannot have a job, they cannot get a paycheck, they have a record, and we need to get rid of all of those things and allow people to participate wholly in democracy, the economy, raise their family, pay their taxes, kick into Social Security, and be contributing members of society, not be forever branded as a criminal and a felon. And my goal as senator is to truly break that cycle. And there are a lot of things we can do to move forward.
For sure. And I'm familiar with Kentucky, and I know one of the things that is in Kentucky is they have a thing with private prisons. Talk about private prisons in Kentucky.
Right. I'm so happy you brought that up, because we've made prison a business. There's a county here there's a county in Eastern Kentucky that want to get a federal prison built. It'll be a private prison, and their motivation isn't jobs. Their motivation is that if the prison is built, it will bring 2 major water lines in, because they are not in a position, they do not have drinkable water in their communities. Think about that. This is America. And whether it's Detroit or it's rural Kentucky, we have people who are literally dying from the water that comes out of their pipes. And as I said, those people's motivation is not they want to have a prison and the jobs associated with that. but it's the fact that this prison would bring 2 major water lines into their area. And frankly, I cannot imagine that for-profit and prison should be in the same sentence. Let me give you an example. In the last 8 years, the rate of women in Kentucky has gone up 300%. And I guarantee you that the women here in Kentucky have not gone on a crime spree, but incarcerating women generates more income. And when it's a business and there's a profit motive, politicians are driven by the money. They will pass laws. They will allow things to happen that are unconscionable because it doesn't affect them. And so we have a massive increase in the incarceration of women. In Kentucky, you are almost twice as likely to go to prison for the exact same crime if you're an African-American than if you're a member of the majority. And that's controlling for everything else. The exact same crime, the exact same record, the exact same circumstances. If your color of your skin will determine whether you go to jail or not. And that's because those people of, the people that are looked down upon by our elected officials that are dismissed, they don't think they matter, they don't contribute to their campaigns, they're expendable. They can go into the system and become a cash cow and generate income for politicians, contribute to their campaigns, make sure they stay in power, make sure they stay elected, and make sure the checks keep coming in. And I don't think that the words for-profit and prison should be in the same sentence, just like I don't think for-profit and school should be in the same sentence.
I agree, man. I couldn't have said it any better. It's so crazy that when you start tying money into prisons, what starts happening. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I want you to give out your website really quickly so that everybody can go there, and we will link that in the description once this is over.
Okay, it's Mike4ky.com, Mike4ky.com. And you know what? If you can't donate, that's okay. These are tough times. People are on the ropes. But I'll tell you what, if you want to work for economic and social justice, you can go to Mike4ky.com/sign up and become a volunteer. A lot of the, Andrew Yang's national staff came here to Kentucky to begin working for me. And I guarantee you, if you hit that sign up button, they will contact you, put you to work, texting, phone banking, postcarding, whatever. But we need to get people like Mitch McConnell out of power because they are driven solely by power and money. And that's not what this country's about, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I hope you get elected, man. I sure do.
It'll be a beautiful day, won't it?
It sure will. Absolutely. I love it. Thank you, Mike.
You're doing great work, man. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.